again. Now I'll request Sandeep sir to please say a few words as the
Thank
president
you.
of the Alumni Association.
Thank you,
Sandeep
sir.
sir, over to you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Sapan. Again, on behalf of the Alumni Association, it is a delight and an honor to have Professor Luthra, whom many of us consider as a friend, philosopher, guide. He was there with us from in the beginning of IIFM, and after we left IIFM, and after he left IIFM, our relationship has continued. And I personally have got to know him, his family very well, and he even visited us in Peru. So not I would say not to see me, but to visit Galapagos Islands. That proves his interest in wildlife. That proves his interest, genuine passion and interest in wildlife. I would also say that there is a lot of interest amongst the IFM family in wildlife conservation. There are many enthusiasts, many people, including our director, who has really worked on forest in the way in the classical sense of the term. And there are faculty who have done a PhD from WLL. There are students who are enthusiastic, and also a large number of people in the alumni. So when we were thinking of bringing diversity in our speakers, the first name that came to my mind was Professor Luthra, and it just needed a WhatsApp from us for him to agree, and he agreed at a short notice. So thank you. He is a much in demand person. He also keeps a very scorching travel and tourism, I would say, agenda. He travels a lot, and I believe he's just come back from a cruise in Italy, and is planning his next trip now. So delighted, sir, to have you, and we look forward to your lecture. I hand over to our friend and director Ravi to say a few words.
Thank you, Sandeep.
Dr. Ravi Chandran sir, if you could welcome sir on behalf of the institution and say a few words.
Sir, we feel elated to see you and have you today in our midst, sir. On behalf of IIFM, I extremely grateful and to the Alumni Association for bringing you for this Friends of IIFM series. And sir, at IIFM, we fondly remember you. And in fact, today also, when something related to forest management was talked about in our among our faculty, I remembered your class on forest management technology and some of the systems, some of the technologies which you have taught us 30 years back still holds good. And I told our colleagues and students today that some of these management technology was part of our curriculum that has been removed now. So we want to reintroduce the same thing in the form of an elective or as a compulsory course for the junior batch, sir. And with your the kind of input we had from you, that shaped us well. And many of us are in forestry sector because of you and because of people like you, Professor maybe our Bauguna and R.V. Singh Saab. So no, we really had a fantastic time at the institute, and we felt as if we also are professional foresters. And today, sir, whatever positions we are holding, it's just because of people like you and the kind of input which you have given. It was tremendous. I hope you should come to this institute and address our students, and they get inspired from the kind of work you have done, the kind of knowledge and wisdom you have in this field, particularly forestry and ecotourism, tourism, and other developmental sector. We are extremely happy to have you, sir, and we look forward to listen to you, get more wisdom and knowledge through your talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Ravi.
Professor, over to you for your talk, and we'll then continue with question answers, sir. After.
Thank you, Swapn, and my greetings to all the people who are here today listening to me. It is really a very emotional and nostalgic moment for me because I have been very closely associated with the IIFM and the PGDFM course. I was associated with IFM more than 35 years back, when the before the first PGDFM course started in 1988, I was already in Bhopal in the regional office, and I was involved in developing the course also. And I am so glad to see today my friends, students who are holding such high and such important posts. Sandeep is there, our Ravi Chandran, Swapn. There are so many. I have been meeting Varlakshmi, uh, Ratul is here today, then Manoj Dabas, Ravi Paul Gupta, Vishwanath Shah, Neeraj Prasad. So many, they are doing so well. I am so happy to see that. Of course, the faculty also, we were a very small core faculty at that time when I had joined. Some of you would be knowing those, of course, Ravi Chandran spoke about Bahuguna and R.V. Singh, but then there were Dr. P.K. Biswas, Dr. J.K. Das, uh, Nirja Singhal, Vijay Kumar, Poddar, Mehta, Jaiswal, some of them who are no more. But it was a fantastic time that I had. How these 35 years have passed is really, I wonder, I mean, when I was teaching there, my students would have been, I was in early 30s when I became a professor there. So there was hardly much of a gap between me and the students, maybe 8 years, 10 years. So they were more like friends rather than me being a guide and a philosopher, but we were good friends, and that friendship has continued with many of them even till date. In fact, there was one student, I don't know, some of you may be knowing Vijay Kohl and Anjali. Vijay Kohl actually happened to be my wife's class fellow in school, in Jammu. So that was the kind of relationship that we had with the students who were there. So yes, thank you very much for giving me this opportunity. And Ravi, I would love to come to IFM and also talk to the students there whenever you want me.
Thank you,
So
sir.
today I'll be talking about ecotourism and biodiversity conservation. I'm sure all of you are very senior and have worked. Many of you would have worked in this area of ecotourism or are well aware of what ecotourism is all about. I wouldn't spend too much time on that, but still, so that all of us are on the same page, I just want to start off with what I mean with ecotourism when I talk of ecotourism. So I just thought that I'll immediately put up a definition that is most accepted regarding ecotourism. The International Ecotourism Society has defined ecotourism as responsible travel. See, all these words used are very, very important, as responsible travel to natural areas that conserves the environment and sustains the well-being of local people. Now, many people say that ecotourism is useless. It causes a lot of damage to the environment, etc. I read a lot about it. But what I would like to say there is that that is not really ecotourism. That is mass tourism. When ecotourism gets converted into mass tourism, certainly it will damage the environment. So our responsibility as managers is always to see that ecotourism remains ecotourism. Uh, if you look at this picture, certainly it is not ecotourism, though all of us call it ecotourism, but seeing one tiger and 25 jeeps surrounding it is by no means ecotourism. These are the kind of things that we have to avoid. So when I say ecotourism, I mean visit to a pristine natural area. This is important. Why I say this visit to a pristine natural area is because when in my early days, Ecotourism Society of India is an organization in Delhi, many of you would know. I had attended one of the workshops, and there the ITC group said that we are a pioneer of ecotourism. I said, how are you pioneer of ecotourism? You have your hotels in Delhi, Bangalore, and all. They said, we practice so many practices which are not harmful to the environment. We have solar energy, our waste disposal is very good, etc., etc. I said you can call it responsible tourism, but certainly you cannot call it ecotourism. So that's why ecotourism has to be visit to a natural area, limited to the carrying capacity, as I showed you earlier, with the intention of studying, admiring, and learning about flora and fauna. Because the intention in ecotourism is also very, very important. A person like Salman Khan had gone to one of the parks. Again, he stayed in a lodge which calls itself an ecotourism lodge, and he went and hunted inside. He also would consider himself as an ecotourism because he went to a natural area. He went there to enjoy the nature. He might have contributed to conservation of forest and wildlife by paying money there. He might have also had some positive impact on the local communities. But the very fact that he had gone for hunting and not for admiring that flora and fauna, he was not an ecotourism. So all these points that I have written, I feel are very important when we say what is ecotourism. Ecotourism, as I said, can be in jeep safaris, which is the most important type. But then there are many other things, where you get close to nature. Maybe in an elephant camp, you get into the water, fishing, which was practiced, catch and release kind of fishing, some adventure activities in the nature, canoeing, camping. But a very important aspect of ecotourism is eco trails, something which we've introduced in Karnataka, because jeep safari is something which is very expensive and only people who have lots of money and do not want to walk in the forest can enjoy jeep safari. But the real ecotourism comes when you walk in the forest. And this is targeting the young people who do not have money but who want to go into the forest and enjoy the forest. So eco trails is something with the intention of exposing the people to the small flora and fauna, the biodiversity of the forest. In a jeep safari, you would be looking at maybe a tiger, maybe some mammals, elephants, etc. But when you walk is when you are able to really enjoy. For example, this picture you are seeing with a naturalist or a nature guide, when you go into the forest, even an anthill becomes so important. These are the kind of stories which develop a real interest about the biodiversity in the forest. Like this fellow tells stories about how this anthill is like an Empire State Building, for an ant, for the size of an ant, it is 100-story building. It is totally air conditioned inside. Outside, whatever may be the temperature, inside temperature is maintained at 21 degrees centigrade. Then stories around say a leaf cutter ant. I like to tell a few stories, which make the whole ecotourism very interesting. And that is where you develop really love for the nature. For example, an ant, most of us would just be walking, not even look at an ant. We may step on it and move on. But when somebody tells you a story about, say, this leaf cutter ant, you get amazed. You develop respect for even an ant in the forest. This leaf cutter ant, many of you would know, does not, it's carrying a leaf which is almost 10 times its own weight, like you and I carrying an elephant on our back. It carries it for a long distance. Why does it do it? We wonder. Is it going to eat these leaves? It is actually, it takes it to the anthill where there are specialist ants with strong jaws who make a paste out of this leaf, spread it on the in the floor of the anthill, and on that paste grows a fungus. And it is that fungus that this ant will be eating. So it is like settled agriculture. We say that we human beings started practicing agriculture 10,000, 20,000 years back. But this ant has been doing that for millions of years. It makes a paste, grows a fungus, and eats the fungus and it communicates with the fungus. If the fungus doesn't like the leaf species which has been brought by the ant, it is not very good for it. It gives out a chemical signal and the ant recognizes it. So next time it does not bring that leaf. It is that kind of a whole interaction with the nature which is happening. And it is these kind of things when we talk of in a nature trail that an ant becomes so important. Similarly, there are many stories, like this grasshopper having a private army of its own. Not the grasshopper, tree hopper. This tree hopper takes the sap, which is full of sugar. It develops so much sugar in its body that it keeps excreting sugar droplets. And ants find it very good. They want those sugar droplets. So they come and surround this tree hopper. And if any predator comes and tries to harm the tree hopper, 5, 6 of these ants would attack him. So they become a personal army for this uh, tree hopper, the aphids. So these kind of stories, the potter's wasp, I won't go into all the stories, but there are so many stories that during a nature walk, you can make it. I remember, once Secretary Tourism, Government of India, one Mr. Sujay Banerjee was there. He visited us. I took him to a resort, Jungle Lodge, very close to Bangalore. And we took him for the morning trail where our naturalist spent 2 hours with him just explaining these small things to him. He was amazed. He said, whenever I go to Corbett, Ranthambore, it's only tiger, 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 and we don't know anything else about nature. But here I have learned so much and developed a respect. He said, whatever money you want for jungle lodges, I am willing to give from Government of India. Please make it an example, of ecotourism. So this is really ecotourism where the most beautiful flowers, insects, butterflies, bird life can become such a part of the entire experience of a tourist who goes into the forest. But then, as I said repeatedly, it cannot be enjoyed in a jeep. You have to walk in the forest on a nature trail with a nature guide who can really interpret nature for you. And that truly is ecotourism. Next, we move on to some problem.
We can see your slide.
Yeah. Okay. I mean that it was not moving forward. Now it started. Thank you. Now coming to how ecotourism can help in forestry conservation, can it be of any assistance in forestry conservation? All of us know that direct revenues collected from ecotourism can go in for uh, forest conservation. I'll come to a few examples on each one of these points that I'm raising. It provides alternate livelihood for local communities, weaning them away from dependence on forest products, creates nature awareness amongst influential urban dwellers, resulting in environment-friendly policies and actions, and CSR and private funding for rewilding of private lands. I'll take each one of these individually and talk a little bit on those. Now, direct revenues from some international examples, I am taking my first example from Volcanoes National Park in Rwanda. Many of you are aware of the gorilla tourism, which is so popular. I'm sure you know that you don't go in a jeep to see gorillas. You have to walk to the place where gorillas have nested yesterday. There'll be a nature guide who goes in, a tracker who finds out where these families are, and then they take you. You may have to walk for a few miles, 2 or 3 miles, before you reach the gorilla and enjoy the family. But there are some very strong rules. Number one, I don't know whether you are aware, $1,500 per person are required as a permit just for spending half a day on that trek. That is the kind of money that people have to pay. And they have very strong rules. Only 8 persons are permitted to trek to a family. Around 8 to 10 families are there in that national park. So about 80 to 90 tourists every day would be taken in. Tourists are allowed only 1 hour after they reach the gorillas. And there is a number of months of waiting to go there, despite so much of money which is to be paid for gorilla tourism. And the money is used for conservation of the parks. Some 30, 35 years back, Rwanda, being a poor country, did not have enough money to be able to protect and manage their national parks. But after this gorilla tourism started, from one park, they're earning enough money to manage all the 5 national parks. And then 5% of the revenues also go to local communities, in addition to getting livelihood and other benefits that they get out of this. So this is a kind of money that can be collected for conservation. Bhutan, our neighbor, also many of you would have visited, has controlled its ecotourism very strongly. It charges 250 per person per day from foreigners. Uh, just if you're going, a couple going for a week will have to pay 500 into 7, 3,500 just as a permit to get into Bhutan. Quite expensive. But that is how they have kept a cap, and they are earning good money out of it. Earlier, they were not charging Indians, but now Indians also have to pay, but a smaller sum, 1,200 per day kind of money. And they are doing wonderfully well, as far as forests are concerned. They have 72% of their land area under forest, and the constitution mandates that 60% of the country shall remain under forest forever. Such a progressive country, and they are earning a lot of money out of ecotourism and related activities. Costa Rica is another example which is often spoken about when we talk. It was one of the pioneers in ecotourism, but there the model is a bit different. There people have most of the forests are owned by private individuals. The national parks also, almost 25% of their forest area of the geographical area are national parks, and most of them are private national parks. Government gives incentives to people to convert their banana plantations or other kind of plantations into forests and developing ecotourism. So they are earning good amount of money out of ecotourism. Galapagos Island, what Sandeep was mentioning, where he helped me to visit, when I visited Peru, is another example, where they have a very unique flora and fauna. All biologists know about Galapagos Islands. They have only one island where they allow hotels to come up and people to stay out of the so many islands. Others have to stay on cruises and go and visit and come back, but people are not allowed to live on other islands. And on that one island where they allow people to stay, also they have not allowed any multinational chain hotels to come in. It is all locals who are managing those hotels. Even restaurants are all locals. There's no Pizza Huts and McDonald's or any of those chains which have come in. So that is their way of controlling people coming into Galapagos. Kenya, of course, all of you know, is a very different landscape, savannas, large number of wildlife, and they earn a lot of money, almost 1/3 of the foreign exchange, and more than 1.3 million visitors. These are slightly old figures, but anyway, I thought I'll share these figures with you. Now coming to India, I mean, whether can we in India do? We did a study about 10 years back, in Karnataka, on how much money that we were earning out of timber, sandalwood, firewood, bamboos, and non-timber forest produce. In Karnataka, then we were earning about 1 billion, about 100 crores. And compare it with ecotourism. Now in Karnataka, 43,000 square kilometers of forests are there, out of which less than 400 square kilometers is used for active ecotourism. That is, we are using only 1% of the entire forest for ecotourism. Rest 99% is left as it is for the biodiversity, wildlife, and human needs. And the revenue from jungle lodges and resorts and private resorts put together at that time was a little less than 1 billion. So we are able to earn almost as much as we are earning from consumptive forest resources as from the non-consumptive ecotourism. So it has a huge potential if done rightly. Coming to the second point now of alternate livelihoods. Uh, Tourism, there's a study done which says that for every million rupees invested in the different sectors, tourism, agriculture, and manufacturing, tourism sector gives 47 jobs, agriculture 45, and manufacturing only 13 jobs. And there's a multiplier effect in tourism. For every direct job created, another 3 jobs are created in the informal sector for people like supplying eggs, chicken, vegetables, rickshawala, taxi fellow, etc., etc. And the important part in tourism and ecotourism is that these jobs are created in rural areas. Unlike IT and all, which would be creating jobs in urban areas, they need the infrastructure. Here you can create jobs in rural areas where the jobs are required. So by creating these jobs, we are weaning away the people from their normal activity of going and bringing firewood and selling it, grazing cattle inside, which are harmful to the forest. So that is how you are adding to forest conservation. The third thing is creating nature awareness amongst the urban elite. When you take urban people to the forest, uh, actually the urban people today have lost all contact with the forest. They are living in their air-conditioned bungalows. They don't even know what agriculture is or never go to an agriculture field, much less the forest. It is only ecotourism which takes them there. And after seeing that, the kind of interest that they develop is phenomenal. I remember I always quote this example in Jungle Lodges. Justice Kripal Singh, who was then the Chief Justice of India, had visited. After visiting there, he saw some firewood and trucks going out of the national park, Nagarhole National Park. Then he asked, uh, what is this? So we told him that it is dead and fallen trees which are being extracted. So he said, are dead and fallen trees not required in the forest? So our naturalist told him that they are very important for the ecosystem because the insects and birds and so many small animals would be depending on these dead trees. They would breed there, and it is very much required, and it should go back to fertilize the soil. After listening this, when he went back, his first order that he gave was that not even a blade of grass can be taken out of a protected area, which continues till date. So that was a direct impact of a important person coming into the forest as an ecotourist and then going and making changes in the policy. We also have a volunteer training program, for example, in Karnataka, where people from different sectors, IT, BT, finance, who are interested in forest, they come, we train them for a week or 10 days, certify them, and then they help us in so many things, in the forest. If there's a fire, they come and help us. They help us in patrolling, intelligence gathering, in getting CSR funding, etc. In many ways, these volunteers help us out. And finally, coming to the slightly new and out of box thinking, where CSR and private funding can be used for rewilding of private lands. I'm sure many of you are aware that rewilding has become a very important and big project all over the world. Rewilding Europe, for an example, is a huge project that Europe has taken up, where rapid urbanization has meant that almost 80% of the Europeans today are living in urban areas. And all the young people who are educated do not want to live in rural areas. So the rural society is very old aging, and when they are dying off, there's nobody to take over these lands. So the agriculture also has become not very competitive because of getting at much cheaper rates from other parts of the world. So as a result, they are abandoning those farmlands. The people are abandoning. Nobody to buy those lands also. So European Union has come up with a huge project called Rewilding Europe, where by 2030, 30 million hectares of farmland will be abandoned. 30 million hectares, which is almost half of the entire India's forest. And they have this huge project of rewilding and bringing back wildlife into these abundant farmlands. Bison, for an example, the European bison, which had become extinct almost 100 years back, more than 100 years back, has been brought back from captive breeding. There were some 54 captive breeding bisons, from which they have grown to more than 3,000 today, and they have been introduced in the wild, something which had become totally extinct in this Rewilding Europe project. Wolves have started coming back, which were almost disappearing in Europe. Similarly, in Australia, there's the Australian Wildlife Conservancy. Australia also has this huge problem of human-animal conflict, where kangaroos, they come out to the fields, agriculture fields, and there's a huge conflict. People try to kill it and drive it back, like in India we have with the elephants. There, this NGO, Australian Wildlife Conservancy, came in and they started buying lands in these conflict areas, and these fragmented forests, they started joining them together. And today they are managing more than 3 million hectares with a lot of biodiversity being brought back into these agriculture lands. Africa is another example. You see in this Africa, the green parts that you are seeing in this, these green ones are the huge national parks. They are huge, of course, as against 1 or 2,000 square kilometers of Nagaroles and Ranthambores. Their parks are 10,000, 15,000 square kilometers. But their parks also, as you will see, are fragmented. They don't have corridors. Animals are not able to move from one park to the other. And these red ones that you are seeing are the ones that an NGO has started buying back and putting it for tourism, and allowing the animals to come in to these. And they have a very ambitious plan. The next, here you see, the entire red one is their master plan, where they are going to connect all the parks from one to the other. And all this is happening by earning revenues out of tourism in these huge parks. It's, of course, the landscape is very, very different. As you know, it is savannas, and they have very, very big parks. This is some of you who've been to Kenya, Masai Mara. I just wanted to give this also as an example. This park that you are seeing. Sandeep, I can go on for 10 more minutes.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I can. No problem. It's okay. This is the Masai Mara National Park, only the one that you can see yellow color. Now, all these lands nearby are community held lands. Unlike in India, their ownership is very different. They have community owned lands. And Masai is the main tribes in these areas. And they herd cattle, they are cattle herders, these Masai. Now, their cattle, they would leave into these areas, and lions or leopards would come out and kill the cattle, and there would be a huge conflict. The Maasai would come and poison their cattle so that the lion gets poisoned, and so many lion deaths used to take place. It was not a very good situation there. But then they decided that let us convert these into conservancies for tourism. So all these that you are seeing are community lands, which are now conservancies, where the fences between this park have been dropped. Animals are allowed to move out, and people have developed camps and resorts, lodges in these areas, and they have their own private national parks, conservancy. So they've almost doubled the area of Masai Park, and through this, they give guaranteed income to Masai owners. They have a lot of rules and regulations, 1 tent per 280 hectares, maximum 12 tents per camp. Camp should be temporary structures, limited vehicles, and these kind of camps are allowed. And this is how the conflict has been resolved to some extent. Now, with these international examples, the question that comes up is, should private lands be used for ecotourism in India? And could they be used? Can we use them for ecotourism? In a way, since we live in a very different kind of a environment, huge populations, and the landscape is very, very different from Africa and some of these European countries. But I just want to give you an example of Karnataka. If you look at this map of Karnataka, you will see that all these green patches are the forest areas, and this dark green, brownish is the other national parks and wildlife sanctuaries. Now here you will see that almost this is Bangalore. So almost from Bangalore, when you can move primarily, these are forest areas, through forest areas right up to Goa and Maharashtra. We have a connectivity which is available. But despite this connectivity being there, there is a lot of conflict which happens, especially the elephant conflict. Same map, you see these orange ones are the elephant dung. A study was done about elephants, elephant dung study, by which they wanted to see that where and how do the elephants move. And it was found that though we do have a connectivity here, but elephants prefer their own traditional paths, which they have been using for thousands of years and which is in their memory. So they like to go through, and which are mostly private tea, coffee plantations, and even agriculture lands. And there's a huge conflict as a result of that. The elephant corridors have been mapped in Karnataka and many other parts of the country now, with the government and NGOs coming together. Here you will see that these ones are all private lands and the green parts are forest lands. Now, here you will see that the elephant, this is the traditional corridor going from one park to the other, but it has been totally become a private land with agriculture and all. So they have this yellow one is something that we wish to acquire and open up this corridor. Similarly, there are many examples here. Also, you see the corridors have become very narrow, or in some places the corridors are non-existent. This is Bandipur and Mudumalai. In between that, the Moyer Gorge is too steep, so the elephants have a very small patch which is left for them to the corridor left for them to move from one park to the other. Here between Nagarhole and Kerala's Brahmagiri and Karnataka's Brahmagiri and Kerala's Wayanad sanctuary, this area has become totally closed. There's no corridor. So huge conflict. So we want to open this up, this red portion. Now, how do we do it? That is the most important question that we have in front of us. Now the forests are fragmented, as I said. They have become islands of biodiversity in an ocean of hostility. This was a phrase used by an Australian author for Australia, where all the parks have become islands of biodiversity in an ocean of hostility because of the conflict which is happening. So they need networking. They have corridors have to be restored. Now, even in India now today, rapid urbanization is happening. Today, we are somewhere around 35% population in urban areas and 65 in rural areas, as against the West, where it is 80-40, 80 urban for 80-20, 20 in rural areas. Even China has crossed 50%. They are more than 50% in urban areas today, less than 50% in rural areas. Same thing is happening in India now. People are moving towards urban areas. What happens then? Today, in most of the tea and coffee plantations, people do not want to live there. The young fellows are well educated, living in USA, UK, Bangalore, Mysore. They don't want to be in the coffee plantations. Old people are not able to manage or dying off. There's no labor available today. They have to get Bangladeshi labor to manage their plantations. So when I was the chief wildlife warden, I had an offer from Hassan, one of the districts in Karnataka, for almost 10,000 acres of land they said that we want to leave it and go away. Please buy it. Now, we would have been very happy. It is wonderful forest kind of an area. But the amount of money required was 400 crores. Government doesn't have that kind of money, or even if they have, they're not willing to give for this particular purpose. So the farmlands would start getting abundant in India also. So we have to do something about it. Uh, there are different possibilities. One is that the government buys private lands. As I said, mechanism is there, but money is not there, and the rules and regulations are very lengthy procedures. It doesn't happen easily. There's a possibility of NGOs getting in, some NGOs have got in also. Wildlife Trust of India has bought a couple of lands and transferred it to the forest department in these corridors to open up these corridors. But then it's a very, very slow process. The third process, as is happening in many uh, African and European countries, is that private holders or trusts consolidate land holdings and get it declared as community reserves. Our Wildlife Protection Act of 72 does have a provision for private lands to be declared as community reserves, like a private wildlife area, where rules and regulations have laid down. So if that starts happening and they use it for earning money out of ecotourism, that is one way forward, which can be tried in an Indian situation. A question which is very often asked of me is that if this starts happening, will this affect food production in the country? Of course, that possibility is there, but then there's a large amount of literature which talks about uh, food, whether it will continue to be grown in these agricultural lands or is it going to shift to multi-storied control environments. This article from University of Sydney: will food be grown in soil in 100 years time? We already see the advance of vertical and hydroponic farming and the potential of growing meat-like protein in the lab. Synthetic biology is one way forward. This could free up huge tracts of land to allow soil to recover from degradation, restoring ecosystems across the planet, returning areas of soil currently used for food production back to native vegetation, could help us conserve wildlife, defend against floods, and provide natural buffer areas that can filter water and cycle nutrients. Vertical farming is becoming popular, and especially in some of the Scandinavian countries, it has become quite popular, where in controlled environment, very little, almost 250 times less water is used. They are not dependent on weathers. They do not need pesticides because it is controlled environment. So that is the future. I'm sure 50 years from today, most of the farming would have shifted into these kind of areas, and a lot of lands will become available for rewilding. But our biggest challenge is, till that time, we should not allow our biodiversity to become extinct. Even meat patties and all are being grown in labs today. In Singapore, I am told that they have started selling these also. So in conclusion, if the principles of ecotourism are strictly followed, it has great potential in conservation of forests and wildlife. As I said, it creates ambassadors of conservation, like the example of the Chief Justice of India, Justice Kripal, I told. There are many, many such more examples. It provides funds for conservation, develops a stake for the local communities and enlists their support, can help in restoring the animal corridors and increase the home range of animals. It will then reduce man-animal conflict. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much
sir.
for that very, very comprehensive overview, sir. Not only about how ecotourism works, but glimpses into some very amazing nature sites that you can encounter through ecotourism, but also how holistically ecotourism is a very important mechanism that can allow us to monetize the intangibles, the cultural value of nature, which is arguably one of the most the highest non-tangible value of nature, and how it also can sensitize many key decision makers in favor of nature. All the models that you presented, sir, very helpful for all of us to know. Many of us are committed towards the cause of rewilding. So, sir, this presentation will go a very long way in helping us. Sir, if it's okay, we have a few questions that have already popped up in the chat.
Sure.
I'll request our colleagues to just address the questions directly to you. And after that, we might take a few more. We have about 10 minutes left. So I'll request those who ask their question to quickly just give a very brief introduction, your background, your institution, and ask brief questions to sir. So let's start with Avinash, who has a question on the relationship between rural tourism and ecotourism. Avinash, are you there?
Yeah, thank you so much. Am I audible?
Yes, Avinash.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm Avinash from PFM 98 2000. First of all, thank you so much for this discussion. It was so much to learn and with so much of knowledge. So I recently visited Chhindwara and I learned that Madhya Pradesh government had started a scheme of homestay in the rural areas, especially the places like Tamia, which is a forest-rich area. And so, can we consider this also as an initiative of the government to promote rural tourism, ecotourism?
Um, yes. See, basically, as far as government is concerned, I firmly believe that government, as far as ecotourism is concerned, should only develop activities inside the forest areas and not build hotels or lodges inside on the forest lands.
Right.
This has to be left to private people on private lands. And one of the best ways of doing it is homestays, because there you are able to, what should I say, uh, help many more people, the local people, to earn money out of ecotourism, and that is the best way forward. In Karnataka, Kerala, we already have a very strong homestay policy where we are incentivizing people to develop more and more homestays, and rather than having big hotels and resorts.
Thank you.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, yes. I mean, definitely it gives the answer in regards to the already taken initiative in different areas. Can I very quickly ask another question? Actually, in Jharkhand, uh, this problem is actually, you already mentioned that the children from the urban area have very less exposure to forest flora and fauna. Uh, so we are thinking in Jharkhand to start a pilot project. I already have discussed with some of the schools where the parents, along with the children, can go and stay over weekend in the villages near forest area. I just wanted to understand that while the schools are very upbeat about this concept, I just wanted to understand that if you have any idea that such program is already going on somewhere, so that we can draw some lessons and uh, kind of just try this.
Yeah, sure.
Thank
I
you.
mean, I can tell you from Karnataka, we had a very large program, huge program called Chinnara Aranya Darshan, taking school children to the forest. This was any child who reaches the sixth standard in school, that year they are taken to the wildlife areas where they have tied up with the forest department. We take them to the forest nurseries, one night stay in one of the dormitories there, and then take them to the forest, show them forest working, and send them back. uh, Totally 100% funded by government. The education department has been a very successful program. I am sure many other states would be doing it. The important thing here would be that you need a large number of nature guides for that. Without nature guide, the whole program falls flat.
Thank you so much. This was very helpful, and I look
Thank you
forward
very
to
much.
this exposure. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Avinash. Mr. Chandrakishore, CK sir, your question, please.
Hello, Professor Luthra.
Hello,
Talking to
Chandrakishore. How are you?
good. Totally
You are
my
in
fault.
USA?
I not kept in touch with you.
Yes.
So glad to hear you talk.
Great.
Next, when are you coming to US next time?
I'll certainly contact you. My wife does not have a visa anymore So I'm trying to get a visa with Sandeep's help. So let us
Okay,
see.
all right. Sandeep, make sure I'll be your host here in US next time. So Sandeep, make sure about that. My question to you is that, like, as a private person, if you had to start another ecotourism project, where will you do it in India next? And what would be the minimum investment required?
See, India is such a huge country, many
Yeah.
places, but I have been of late traveling a lot into the hinterland of Goa.
Mm-hmm.
Goa, the coast tourism is very well developed, but they have beautiful forests in the Western Ghats, where which are very suitable and fit for ecotourism, and we are trying to develop those areas
Mm-hmm.
for ecotourism. Now, as far as the cost factor that you are saying is, there are two parts to developing any area. One is inside the forest activities, the trekking trails, the mountain bike
Mm-hmm.
rides, the water-based activities, the high rope courses. There are so many things which can be developed inside, which would generally be done by the government.
Right.
And the resorts and homestays will come out uh, on the private lands, which has to be developed with private initiative. So the cost that way get divided. So if you are asking about what kind of investment would be required for developing a resort, uh, it's a very difficult question to answer. Normally, in ecotourism resort, we suggest should not be more than 15 to 20 rooms to start with.
Mm-hmm.
By rooms, I mean cottages, tented cottages, and all. And the cost should always be kept low because you don't have opportunities to earn money like you do in a five-star hotel or a three-star
Exactly.
hotel in urban areas. So, because the inventory is generally very small, the cost should always be kept small. So, people don't mind staying even in tents. So
Mm-hmm.
you can develop very nice bathrooms with tented cottages for 10 lakh rupees per cottage.
Mm-hmm.
If you are developing 1.5 crores and another, I mean, 2.5 crores to 3 crores should be good enough to develop a small ecotourism resort.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good perspective, and I totally understand. Goa would be a good hotspot. Any other hotspot in India that you might think of, which is good for, like, we have so many IFMites now in different places where they can think about basically
Sure.
adopting a place or adopting even a village to create an ecotourism project.
Absolutely. We can talk about it, Chandru,
Yeah.
separately.
We
Mhm.
will,
Andrew,
Chandra sir, we'll
there
look
is
forward
one
to.
in Raisen district of Madhya Pradesh. Some IFMites have bought land. You can join that, and we can
Oh,
make it
okay.
into a
That's good to know.
forest.
All right.
Yeah,
Two
we'll,
of
we'll
them are in this chat.
in this chat.
That's good.
We'll reach out to you, sir. We'll connect you. We'll get you to buy land and build a resort for all of us.
Okay.
Okay. Next question, Ratul. Ratul.
I cannot hear you, Ratan.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening. And
Good evening.
yeah, I'm Ratul, and I am senior consultant with Ernst & Young, but I'm attached as a wildlife expert to Assam Forest Department in their project, Assam Project on Forest and Biodiversity Conservation. And my journey in wildlife and ecotourism sector started with SIR only. So I am till date. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay.
So, sir, like after all these years working with I think a couple of forest department in this last 19 years of journey. So I've seen like now Tripura Forest Department has adopted the JLR concept under the name Tripura Trails and Eco Resorts Limited. So after working with the department for all along these years, like we see the limitation, like what you also think, because we have find that the limitations in implementing the Karnataka ecotourism model in most of the state department, is it the lack of capacity, or do you think like the department is too focused on wildlife management and the community incentivization has taken a back seat in adopting the JLR model? And because when we see the JLR model, the amount of revenue that it incurs for a state and in the department, and we have seen that.
Right.
So what are your thoughts, sir?
See, yeah, of course, Jungle Lodges has been an exceptional success. Today, we have a turnover of more than 100 crores. We just crossed that, 115, 120 crores. Now, anybody who asks me, I say that it is not easy to replicate jungle lodges. Even Karnataka, if they have to do it today, they would not have succeeded in a jungle lodge. It was a particular time, when the whole concept started and the way it started. I'm sure you are aware that it started off with Tiger Tops of Nepal, private management, government being a sleeping partner. Then they left, and then government took over. They lost money for first 10 years, huge losses. I mean, which government is, you tell me, ready today to bear losses for 10 years, hoping for a success after that? So jungle lodges came up in very exceptional circumstances. It was just the Forest Conservation Act was just coming in. Wildlife Protection Act was not so strong at that time. So things were much, much easier. Today, things have moved forward a lot, in a different direction. So developing a jungle lodges becomes a difficult thing. You have to think of different kinds of models. Like Odisha has been toying with the idea of a lot of community interaction for developing their units. I don't know whether you had the chance to go to Odisha and see what they have been doing through their ecotourism board, where it's all local community driven, with the board giving them marketing support and getting bookings for them and paying them some fixed kind of money. So I think forest now at that time private individuals were not willing to invest in resorts and things near the forest areas. Today the things are changed. There's huge amount of investment available. So government should not think of setting up jungle lodge kind of resorts or hotels today anymore. That is not the need of the hour. The government should, the forest department should think of developing activities and facilitating people to come into the forest. Many a times they don't allow that. Walks in the forest, trails in the forest, like I said, canoeing, kayaking, rafting, whatever is possible. Those kind of things is what the government should get in with the local involvement of the communities living in those areas. Train them, capacity building, and leave hotels and homestays to the private individuals. That's what I think is the future.
Thank you,
We
sir.
are already on time, but there are three more questions in the chat. If everybody doesn't mind, I'll just summarize and ask those questions on everybody's behalf. And then, so one question is on, I think you partly answered this in terms of community tourism. The question is that community tourism is very popular. The question is, what kind of revenue sharing mechanisms can be adopted for purpose of financial benefit for local development and forest department? What percentage of revenues should be diverted for community development and forest conservation out of tourism? That is one question. And then the other issue is that like on the demand side economics of ecotourism, how stable and secure are the jobs created in ecotourism, given that the sector would be much more sensitive to a bad economy than agriculture and manufacturing? If there is a recession, if people are losing jobs, this is the last thing that they'll go and do. And what is the tipping point of investments? Have you seen in the last several years that there have been some tipping points where when the economy has defaulted, people have stopped going to or visiting ecotourism site? So, sir, one on the supply side, one on the demand side, sir. How much money should be reinvested in the sector? And then what is the sort of the elasticity and at what level do people visit these sites? And is this sector fairly affected?
Sure. See, as far as revenue share models, there are a number of models available. As I said, Odisha is one model that you can look at. If I'm not mistaken, it's 70-30%, sharing, 70% going to the communities and 30% going to the government for marketing and bookings and those kind of things, supervising the whole thing. So, which is a good model, I think. 70% if it goes to the communities, it is a good revenue share model. The states can work around that. Now, the question of the tipping or the problems that you spoke, we saw that during the last few years, COVID, tourism was the worst hit thing, many resorts, many places did close down during that 3 difficult years. But as soon as COVID is over, now revenge tourism has come in. Today, uh, the demand for tourism has gone up so high. I mean, jungle lodges today are not able to cater to the demand that is existing today. Um, they are charging for Kabini almost 25,000 rupees per room today, per night. So that is the kind of revenues that are possible uh, for the tourism sectors. There will be certain, yeah, I mean, if there's a economy dip and all, tourism will be the first one to be hit. But the opposite is also true. As soon as the economy starts developing, people get fed up and want to go out, and tourism comes back in large
So,
numbers.
major dependence on macroeconomic trends. Anmol was a very good question. I'm sorry if I didn't do full justice. So, last and closing question is that in the 40 years of JLR's of journey, is it now seen as one of those enviable projects that every state's HOF looks at, and at least one in their tenure tries to replicate in their state? Has it really inspired replication? Do you think it will require replication in the future?
See, I said that to Ratul also, uh, many states. I have visited at least 15 states in the country where they wanted me to come and say how they can develop a jungle lodge in their state. But as I said, it's not easy, and in the present times, it is not a very viable option. One should not look at replicating jungle lodges. One should replicate only activities inside the forest, give access to the forest to the tourists. Let private initiative develop hotels and resorts outside. That is the only way forward. A jungle lodge kind of a thing, it developed in Karnataka and is going on, but none of the states that I know of has been able to replicate it
Right.
in the last 30, 40 years.
Needs replication, but with adjustments to context, right? So
Exactly, with adjustment to context. That was pre-Forest Conservation Act days, pre-Wildlife Act becoming very strong. Today, with those acts being strong, you just cannot
Yes,
have
sir.
hotels and resorts inside the forest. We in jungle lodges, even in wildlife sanctuaries, we are having our camps, etc., which is just unthinkable today.
Yes, sir. So the
So one
approvals
should
for
not
that
try and
is
replicate.
absolutely unthinkable. Sir, thank you so much. We are over time. Thank you so much for being so generous in sharing knowledge and experiences with us. We really, really valued this session. It was very, very informative. And I think that there is many more questions that are arising, sir. We'll reach out to you, we'll email you, we'll connect
Yes.
with you if people have further questions and queries. I think with sir, he's part of the family, so we don't have to hesitate, and the interaction doesn't need to limit to just a formal session.
No, anytime. You give my email ID to them, and anybody can call me, give my phone numbers or this thing. I'll be most happy to help out in whatever way I can.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you so much, sir. I'd like to, in the end, check if Sandeep sir and Dr. Ravichandran, if they would like to, Ravi sir, if you would like to say something in conclusion, any thoughts, any comments, or any burning questions, and then we'll conclude.
No, I would just like to say that it was a fascinating talk, and personally, I like the stories. I would have enjoyed some more of these
Yeah, I
wildlife
have many more
stories.
stories, Sandeep.
Stories to tell, and how you are almost like our David Attenborough telling these fascinating stories of insects and worms and birds, and they are so
Sure.
fascinating. And I think, sir, the whole focus of jungle tourism has been these big cats and leopards, and I think we should move away from that. That's
We have
destroying
to
our
move away,
forests.
Sandeep.
We have
Yes.
to look at the other flora and fauna. And I have been to the Amazons a couple of times, and we never even bothered about looking for the jaguar or the anaconda. There is so much of stories
Absolutely.
in the trees and the rivers and the insects, and I think that should be brought forward. I think that is
Absolutely.
also the subtext of your lecture today,
Sure.
apart from the fact that don't the forest department should keep the forest alive and protected, and facilitate private operators to take groups into. I think that's also the message, sir, you are giving. Thank you very much for this talk, and I think you have generated rekindle interest in wildlife and ecotourism in amongst many of us. And on that last point, sir, I think COVID actually people preferred going to such homestays and ecotourism places rather than going to big
See,
hotels which were not accessible.
so, to homestays, yes, but not resorts, generally.
Not resorts, yeah.
Homestays, yes, which they would book the full place, the 2-3 families get together and go. But they did not want to mix up with the
Yes,
other
absolutely.
people generally.
Thank you very
Great.
much, sir. It was great seeing you once again.
Great.
Thank you.
Ravichandran sir, and Ravichandran sir, are you
Thank
there?
you so much, sir. It was really wonderful to listen to you. And even in Andaman, sir, JLR wanted to help Andaman administration to develop the ecotourism through Andaman Nicobar Forest Plantation Corporation. I have seen all those documents, sir, but somehow it couldn't see the light of the day.
I know
And a
that.
lot of hurdles were there.
I know.
It is not easy to, as you rightly said, it is not easy to replicate JLR model everywhere. But still, whatever you have told us, no sir, the good thing is we need to, no sir, promote activities in wilderness areas rather than creating
Yeah.
infrastructure facilities. That we should leave it to the private entities. So
Absolutely.
with that, I really thank you, sir. We look forward to have you at IIFM.
Sure. Thank you very
Thank you
much.
so much, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody,
Pleasure
for joining.
talking to you.
Thank you very much, sir. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.